Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, welcome everybody to the latest episode of Future of Work and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com, where I am executive community leader for Future of Payroll, and I do several other things. I'm known as an advisory board wrangler here, for example. But of course, this episode is about my guest, who is Jerome Gouvernel, and he is CEO and co-founder of Datascale HR, which is a really, really interesting company. Welcome, Jerome.
Thank you, Brent. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love the hoodie that you're wearing. That's some good swag right there.
There you go. The marketing, some free marketing.
Awesome, awesome. You know, before we get into our topic today, which is very intriguing, we talked about it quite a bit in the green room on a different call. Could you just share with our audience a little bit, just, what makes Jerome tick? What drew you to the human capital management space, payroll especially, and what galvanizes you, kind of fires you up on a daily basis, around the world of work?
Yeah, interesting question. Thank you. I guess I fell into payroll like most people probably. I used to be a software developer and I was working for a company. I think the head of payroll left, or maybe the software went out of maintenance. I can't remember now. But anyway, I got assigned to fix the payroll. And then I discovered a whole world of interesting problems, and I've been doing it ever since. To answer your question, why I love it is because it's so complicated. It looks easy. I mean, the concept is really easy, right? You just add up a bunch of stuff, and then you deduct some taxes, and then you just pay people. But in the real world, it's infinitely complex. And that's what I love about it. It's such a conundrum. It's so easy on the outside, so complex on the inside. And yeah, it's kept me interested for 30 years now.
That's really interesting. I love the way you characterize payroll. You said a lot of interesting problems. I think that's a good way of putting it. There's a lot of interesting problems that arise in payroll, and it is very complex. I think a lot of folks, there's sort of a misnomer. This is a little bit of a caricature of it, but essentially, hey, what's the big deal? Just press the button at the end of every pay period, and everybody gets paid. And that's not how it works. So we're going to talk a little bit about global payroll today, and also just as much around artificial intelligence and how it relates to putting together global HCM systems. And specifically, we're going to talk about payroll and global payroll. But from my understanding is that from a technological perspective, the ability to build a global payroll engine, it does exist. But maybe there's another solution, another way, a third way, if you will. And I think the topic we sort of talked about, and I think hopefully I'm encapsulating it right here, is that, acting as state-of-the-art so-called middleware to wrestle all kinds of global cobbled-together multi-vendor ecosystems into performing seamlessly. Artificial intelligence specifically offers that potential third way. What are your thoughts there?
Wow, you've touched on a lot of different topics. Just to get it out of the way, you can, for sure, build a global payroll. In fact, my team was the first, as far as I know, we were the first ones that built that back in the 2000s, early 2000s with GlobalView. And yeah, it's doable. And what you realize after a while is that it's, even if you get it right, which I think with enough effort, just about anybody can get it right, you realize that the real problem isn't actually the payroll itself, but it's getting clients onboarded. It's connecting the client's infrastructure into the payroll infrastructure. It's ensuring that the data is correct. You were saying something earlier about, what does it look so easy on the outside and why it's so hard? It's like, it's like the final move in chess. It's like checkmate always looks obvious if that's the only move you've seen. But moving all the pieces to get to that point is actually really difficult. And in the payroll world, that's getting clean data into the payroll. Like if you can get clean data into the payroll, you're 90% of the way there. Not to say that payroll itself is easy, but the problem space is kind of well understood. It's fixed, and you can build templates for payroll. You can pre-set all of your calculation rules. You can pre-test everything. So for those operators that have been doing payroll for a long time, they've actually got quite sophisticated with their ability to run payroll on demand, and they're very efficient at that. So setting up the payroll, running the payroll, once you've done the work of getting your templates right, is actually pretty straightforward. But the unknown, the thing that changes every time, the things that you can never get standardized, is always the data. Is how do you get the data? Because every client is going to give you different data. They don't store it in the same way. They don't have the same data. Some of them have a lot of good data, some of them don't. And usually it's a mix. One client will have great data on their home country because that's where they operate. So they're quite sophisticated there. And, but when you start looking at the long tail of countries where they operate, you're going to get countries where they have almost nothing or very little understanding of how to get the data into the payroll. So that aspect is what we decided to solve for. Yeah.
So that's a great segue. Let's talk about AI's role. And let's say, okay, so let me kind of set the stage here. A hypothetical. Well, this is this is a hypothetical scenario, but it's like so many organizations globally. Lots of different systems, maybe a lot of local LPPs, local payroll providers, um, and just staying focused on global payroll, but obviously global HCM system as well, right? You have
Yeah.
all the different providers and the different you have all your regions, and they all might have different applications, right? And in a pre-AI world, that looks like just that almost makes you want to just pick up your toys and go home, right? But
Yeah.
with AI, that what I understand, I'm just going to kind of like encapsulate it here, like sort of the punchline is that AI can kind of bring those things together, and sort of even the concept of how difficult integration is has mitigated or decreased. There's AI is we don't want to call AI sort of a magic secret sauce, but how does the AI help with that? How does it sort of make those scenarios less difficult to deal with?
That's a great question. I think firstly, I want to clarify what we mean when we say AI, because it's become a ubiquitous word that is used in all sorts of different contexts. Um, what's changed in the last 2 years is not AI per se, but it's LLMs specifically, so large language models, and what they can do and what they can bring to the table in order to, address the challenge of messy HR data. Um, so more generally, though, the, the problem of cleaning up data, of understanding data, of mapping data from one system to another system, so sending it from your source HR system, let's say, to your payroll engine, for example, that problem is infinitely complex in the sense that there can be infinitely many different data types and sources and variations on the sending side, so on the HR side. And similarly, on the payroll side, every payroll is configured differently. Every payroll engine works differently. Obviously, every country is different. But even within countries, different providers have different technology and different standards and so on. So when you start multiplying all of these areas of complexity, you end up with an enormous but crazy number of permutations. And that's the problem that AI can help with. Because that problem space being as large as it is, if you do it in a traditional way, you're going to be building if this, then that, or if this, else statements, or lookup tables, or mapping tables. However you do it, it's going to be a manual rules engine. And so you're fighting this infinite problem with very finite resources, which is, going to set all these rules. And then you have to maintain them, which is actually probably even harder. With AI generally, it's something that can learn by itself, that has some kind of autonomy. And I'm not referring specifically to LLMs. I'm talking about machine learning, supervised learning, all of those techniques. And so once you have a system that can teach itself, you have the possibility of beating this infinite problem, because that means that the human doesn't have to be everywhere. It doesn't have to be, the outcome is not tied to the inputs anymore. The thing can learn by itself. Now you got to figure out how to make that work. So the LLMs, so the sort of the new AI, the new kids on the block, add another layer of sophistication to this kind of solution, because they're very good at understanding context. So if you say to an LLM, hey, I've got this pay code. I don't know what it is. I know it's in South Korea. It's in Korean, in fact. I can't even read it. So I have no idea what it is. I just know it's a pay code. Can you help me understand what it is and what it's for? In a second, you're going to get an answer from any LLM that is probably 99% correct, or at least directionally correct. So you have this enormous amount of knowledge at your fingertips. That's the upside. And people get very excited about this. And I mean, it is very exciting. The downside is you will never get an answer that is 100% correct. That's never going to happen. And the reason for that is because LLMs are fundamentally statistical machines. So every time they give you an answer, they're basically playing roulette. Now, it's very sophisticated and it's very accurate, but it's still roulette. And in the world of payroll, 99% is great, but if it's not 100%, you still need humans in it.
If I can just interject for a second, this is so illuminating. I actually we had a session on AI and HR technology at HR West last week, which was in Oakland, California, HR.com's annual event. And I actually moderated a panel. I had a couple panelists on it from the workforce management side and also from the payroll side, just what some of the implications of AI for those two domains of human capital management. And one of the things that came up is, when you said statistically, most of the time it's accurate, but there's a chance that it isn't. I thought that made me think just now of, hallucinations. AI hallucinates, right? And we've all seen it when we do a little search with Llama or
Yeah,
Gemini or ChatGPT or
yeah.
whatever. You have to check it, and sometimes you're like, where the heck did that come from? That's nowhere in any of the links that were shared, right? And the first time I dealt with that, I thought, what's going on? That AI sucks, right? But in any event, imagine a hallucination in payroll. You're in big trouble.
Yeah, you are. And the challenge with LLMs is that hallucinations are not bugs; they're features. It's actually meant to hallucinate. I mean, that is essentially a reflection of how it works. It statistically guesses each token, each next word, and because it's statistical, yeah, statistically it's going to be mostly correct, but it also means it's going to have errors.
Can I just, this is a little bit down off the beaten path, but I just want to ask super quickly. The folks who build these models, the AI, are they assuming that the person using the AI will correct, or hoping that the person using the AI will correct the hallucination so that the AI learns, or is that just a statistical thing that's just that it's doing that of its own volition and like in a vacuum just to get better?
So it's a really good question, actually. If you look into the history of LLMs, it all started with neural networks doing image recognition back in the 80s. And it was purely academic research. There was really no intend to productize it, or at least not for businesses. And more recently, when the transformer technology was invented and they started building around that, they saw that they could get really amazing results with text as well, not just images, but text. I think how it gets used in the real world is a new problem that they hadn't really thought about. They weren't designing for the problems that we're trying to solve. They were designing for a scientific problem. Can we get a machine to find patterns and be useful in some way across massive amount of text, and they solved that problem. I think what's happening now, and a lot of the discourse that we read about, when Sam Altman goes on stage and talks about the next version of ChatGPT or whatever, I think they're trying to address this problem. But what the most respected scientists in the field are saying is, you're not going to address this problem with LLMs. It's a feature of the LLM. That's how it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to be 100% accurate. That's why it's so powerful, in fact, because it can infer things that were not in the training material. The fact that it's able to hallucinate is what makes it so valuable. But it's also what makes it less valuable for problems like the one we're discussing today, which is, payroll outcomes, because those things are deterministic in nature. They have to be correct. There's no almost correct. Nobody cares if your payslip is almost correct. It has to be correct. And so in a way, we're using a tool that is showing a lot of promise, but it really wasn't designed for what we want to use it for. Mm-hmm. And this is why at the beginning I clarified the difference between LLMs and AI more generally, because AI more generally doesn't always have these problems. These problems are LLM problems. They're not AI problems in general, right? Mm-hmm. But now that we, kind of call LLMs AI, it's confusing everything, because now we're saying, well, so AI is not accurate. Well, it depends what kind of AI you're using. The traditional machine learning is actually extremely accurate. Well, some of it anyway. Like, there's so many different areas of machine learning.
That's interesting. Just to get back to payroll specifically here in the topic that we're, and also being mindful of time. What do we mean when we call AI the new middleware? Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, that's also a great question. What is middleware? Conceptually, why does it even exist? It's a layer that kind of connects backends with front ends, right? It's in the middle. And why is that even a problem that needs to be solved? Is because typically you want to associate, or you want to connect different types of backends with different types of front ends. If you didn't do that, it would just be one stack, in which case it would be kind of a monolithic architecture. So middleware is there to address this many-to-many connection, right? So many backends can connect to many front ends and vice versa. LLMs, AI in general, but LLMs in particular, are very good at guessing. They're guessing machines. And in general, these types of broad problems where you're trying to connect things and you're not quite sure which things should connect to what thing, and it might depend on the context, and you don't know the context before you start. So, it might be a just-in-time kind of decision. LLMs are great. They're guessing machines. So you give them that information. You say, well, my backend does this and provides this data, and my front end requires to consume these data. Help me. And it will take a guess. And it will try and create connections and mappings between fields and files and workflows and so on. And it's the 80-20 rule. It's the Pareto principle. In 20% of the time, it'll give you 80% of the answers. And that feels like magic, because there is no other technology that does this. And it's very, very seductive, because when you see this, you automatically assume that to get to the last 20%, right, you just need a little bit more work. And then soon you discover that it's not a little bit more work. because
Yeah.
it's a feature of an LLM. It's never going to be right, not 100%. So anyway, why people call why LLM is great for middleware, or I don't remember exactly your question, but in that space, it saves a lot of time to get to the 80%.
Hmm.
I think where everyone's getting stuck is, what do you do past the 80%? How do you get to 100%? What's the mechanism?
One thing that I'm hearing, another little bit of a tangent, is that, that the AI never assumed, at least now, right now, and what I'm hearing from you is that AI, maybe not consciously, well, let's not go down that rabbit hole, but the AI is never assuming that it's right. It is assuming that it's guessing. Whereas
Yes.
the humans may assume that they are right, and there is a situation where each of those types of approaches is is advantageous.
Uh, Absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, um, because LLMs are so elegant and so skilled and elegant with language, and so eloquent in the way that they describe things and give us answers, we as humans are not used to machines speaking to us like that. The only other experience we have of intelligent, people saying intelligent things are educated, intelligent people who are knowledgeable. Our teachers, our professors, the people that we respect, our parents when we were kids. We associate them with knowledge, and um, yeah, and real intelligence.
Mm.
And because LLMs are so good at text and producing this kind of text, we immediately ascribe to them the same qualities that the people around us may have, and that's the risk. Because in reality, they're not intelligent. They have no understanding of anything, and this is the thing. They have a lot of knowledge and absolutely no understanding. That's
Yeah, no, wisdom, right? And that's
no
interesting.
wisdom.
That's some. I had a conversation. I forget who it was, or maybe with several folks over the past few years, where I said, maybe the biggest um, concern with AI is that we might mistake it for being completely human when it isn't yet, or
Do you
might.
remember Tamagotchis? Those little toys. They were
Yeah.
tiny little electronic toys. This was like 20, 30 years ago. You used to buy them for kids, and then you used to have to feed an animal. And the way you fed it is by pressing some buttons. And it was so dumb. Like it really didn't do much. But they were so popular and so addictive because this little thing this little animal that you were trying to feed, if you didn't feed it, it looked sad, and then you got emotionally attached to this thing, and kids would be really upset because eventually it would die because it would run out of battery, and then the thing would eventually die. um, but I always use this example to say, if something that dumb can get people so emotionally connected to it, imagine what an LLM can do.
Oh, tell me about it. Tell me about it. Just one last question. Again, and we could talk about AI specifically all day long, and we should probably have you back on the podcast. But just bringing it back to global payroll ecosystem specifically. Uh, how should vendors of global payroll technologies and ecosystems, and maybe the users of them as well, look to the future? Where will the most viable innovation probably be, and why? If you could even touch on quantum computing, I know there was a recent huge advancement coming out of Microsoft. Where will the innovation be if we're
Well, I'll
predicting?
dispense with quantum computing. I mean, obviously, I'm not an expert, but I do read a lot about quantum computing. So far, not a single one of the predictions that has been made or the claims that have been made about quantum computing in the last 20 years have turned out to be true. So it's like nuclear fusion. Until proven otherwise, it's useless. Let's just leave it at that.
Okay.
There is nothing that the current state of quantum computing can contribute to the world of payroll, but that's not a bad thing. Um, I think whenever I think about global payroll, to me, the biggest problem is how hard it is, how expensive it is. The fact that if you want to roll out a new vendor or a new HR system or new payroll, whatever it is, and you've got 20 countries, it's going to take you 2 years minimum, right? It never takes less than 2 years if you've got, a bunch of countries in 3 continents. And that's insane. Why should it take 3 years? And I think all other innovation are subsumed in this problem because it's so expensive to do the basic things. All of the fancy bells and whistles, all the cool stuff that vendors spend years developing, all the cool interactive, AI stuff even, it never gets rolled out. It's there. The demos are there. You go and see the vendor and they'll do amazing demos. And then it's the last thing that gets implemented. And by the time the project ends, everyone's exhausted because they've just spent 2 years trying to implement payroll. And there's so little energy left and money in those projects to do the cool things. And so I go back to really basic things. If we can do payroll in 3 months instead of 2 years, then we've got all this time to do all the cool things. And then anything's possible. And there's so many good vendors. I can't keep up with the functionality. Every time I look, somebody's invented some new cool toy. But yeah, if we can save the time and the money so that we don't spend it on the basics like payroll, then we could do amazing things with HR platforms and products.
And that's a message that really resonates. And it's so exciting to see that we're so much closer to that today than we were even just a couple of years ago. Jerome, Datascale HR, thank you so much for being on the podcast. This has been an excellent conversation. We could talk about it all day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Brent. And thanks for the question. Those are fun questions.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.